Okay, so just a little bit about Teens for Impact before I dive in. This won't come as a surprise to you, but every year, nearly 200,000 new teachers graduate from preparation programs across the country, and many of them report feeling unprepared to teach in classrooms of their own. And at Teens for Impact, we think that must change, and we believe that it can change. And our mission is really to ensure that within a generation, the US has the best system of teacher preparation in the world, one where every program consistently prepares candidates who are good on day one and can become great over time. And so we really work to achieve this mission. We bring together networks of leaders from all levels of teacher preparation. So our name is a little bit of a misnomer. We work with deans, but we also work with leaders within schools of education, faculty, department chairs, heads of assessment, all kinds of leaders at all levels to work together to improve the quality of the preparation they're providing. And we do that sort of in three different buckets of work. The first is we do work to empower leaders to develop a shared vision for change and to foster organizational learning and catalyze improvement within their organizations. And we do that primarily through Leadership Development Fellowship for Early Career Deans, known as the Impact Academy. And then we also work with program teams, so faculty and program leaders, to introduce them through our building blocks workshops to some effective program design components and to walk them through a process for thinking about how to engage in program redesign in a meaningful way. The second sort of strand of our work is working with EPPs and preparation programs to improve through evidence by coupling efforts to gather empirical evidence on the content and quality of their programs with support to turn that evidence into cycles of inquiry and improvement. So if we think about an improvement cycle, a lot of times programs get stuck in the action and we're just acting and not really reflecting, and other times we're reflecting a lot but not really acting. And so we try to support programs in thinking through strategies to get the best evidence that's the most useful for improvement and think about how to move from a deep inquiry into that data to meaningful action within their programs for improvement based on what they're learning. And then our third bucket is mobilizing leaders to influence policy within their local context so that they can be a voice at the table advocating for policies that are going to help them lead this kind of deep improvement work that they're really dedicated and committed to. So I'm going to talk today mostly about that second bucket, which is where most of my work sits, and talk a little bit about how we sort of approach that work and some of the things that we're learning from programs across the country. So we have two primary ways in which we support programs to improve through evidence. The first is through our Common Indicator System Network, which is a national effort to gather data on candidate knowledge and skill and program performance using common measures across really diverse educator preparation programs, and then to use that evidence to improve the preparation of beginning teachers by collectively inquiring into it, asking questions of the data with one another so that we're really building an opportunity for a community of really diverse programs to dig into data and learn with and from one another about what's working for who, why, under what conditions. And the second is through our work partnering with states and educator preparation programs to build their capacity to make better use of state-provided and program-generated data for improvement. And this usually takes the form of convening networks of programs that want to work collectively to build their program's capacity to use data while improving a specific aspect of their program. So those tend to have a network focus. So I'm going to describe today the CIS network because I think it provides the best insight into how we approach our work with programs to support them in better leveraging evidence to inform improvement. And I'll talk a little bit about the other two networks that we're currently supporting. So the Common Indicator System Network is a national network of diverse EPPs where currently the network has about 16 educator preparation programs across 13 states who are collecting data on candidate knowledge and skill and then engaging in cross-institutional inquiry into these data. So network members collect data using common measures and data collection protocols across 4 indicators. So we have an observational tool that measures candidate instructional skill while they're in their clinical experience, a survey of candidate beliefs and mindsets that's really focused on understanding candidate efficacy with relation to instruction and classroom management and student engagement, as well as their self-efficacy in relation to engaging in culturally responsive teaching practices. And then we also have a survey of beginning teachers, so graduates who are 1 year post-program, trying to get some insight into once candidates are in the field, what are their reflections on the quality of their preparation, their opportunities to learn. In addition to these data, we also gather data on a whole host of candidate and program characteristics from on each of the programs that are participating in the network. So everything from candidate race, gender, course taking, degree seeking, GPA, all of that, and characteristics of the program itself. So content, course requirements, methods, course requirements, hours of clinical, all of that. So we have a really rich descriptive set of data that programs are then able to collectively inquire into and engage in as they're thinking about how to start to target some improvement work. So the network currently includes about 16 preparation programs across 13 states that are serving over 10,000 candidates in traditional undergraduate, graduate, alternative, and residency programs. Last year, we gathered data. Was our first year of data collection. It was our pilot year. We gathered data on over 3,500 teacher candidates, 400 program graduates, and 100 employers across 13 programs at the time. And now we're entering our second year of data collection. We have several new members, and so we expect the numbers of candidates we're able to collect data on to increase over time. I think it's really important to talk about how the network developed because it really informs our approach to the work and sort of how we think about engaging in this work with programs, as well as gives you a sense of sort of folks' orientation to the work that they are doing with us. So the network itself was co-constructed with members over a 2-year period, and it was really guided and continues to be guided by sort of 2 core principles. The first is that in order for common indicators to be most valuable for improvement, they have to be selected explicitly for that purpose, not just because they're required or we already have them for different reporting or compliance purposes, but because they're really meaningful and are going to help us do the work of improvement. And oftentimes that data is going to look different than what you need for reporting purposes. And so I mention this because we spent a lot of time with programs in the beginning, really thinking about and trying to strip away the compliance mentality that we often get into because we have to think about that for all of our different jobs and reporting and all of that, but to really think about what's going to be most useful for improvement. In order for the system to be most useful, it must be co-constructed among a broad group of stakeholders. And so we continue that to this day. There's an advisory panel that meets monthly to consult on issues related to the network. It has been iterative, deliberate, always in partnership with programs, and that's something that continues. So the CIS developed over the course of 2 years, really in 3 phases. Phases 1 and 2 sort of took place over the 16-17 academic year. These phases really focus on identifying categories of data to collect in common, and then on identifying the measures we would use to get these data across programs. Each of these stages involves several deliberate steps. For example, when we were selecting measures, we collected all the existing measures across network member programs that they were already using to collect data in some of these categories, as well as asked experts in different areas of the field to share measures. We did a content analysis of those, each of those measures against a set of priorities that the network membership had outlined. And those were things like we want to make sure we're selecting measures that have evidence of reliability and validity in other contexts to the extent practicable, that can be implemented across really diverse contexts, all of that. And then we narrowed that field down based on those priorities, put those measures in front of folks, and actually facilitated a 2-day intensive deep dive where folks, faculty, and program leaders from across the network came together, looked at those instruments, deliberated on their value, and then ultimately made recommendations for what to include in the system. The third phase really took place over the next academic year, the 17-18 academic year, and really focused on prototyping the CIS network by testing data collection procedures and initiating the shared inquiry into the data. So we launched the prototype with 13 programs. We worked together to develop processes and procedures for gathering all this data across our diverse contexts, and then for engaging in a cycle of cross-institutional inquiry into these data and trying to figure out what that could and should look like in order to allow all of us to gain some meaningful opportunities to learn from these data and to learn from one another about how to improve. A big part of our work during this prototype phase was really about figuring out how to support programs so that when the data became available that we were collecting and spending all this time gathering, they were really in a position to leverage the data for meaningful program improvement. So this required some pretty significant work to better understand and then improve the conditions for data use that existed across programs. So at Deans for Impact, we really believe that improvement resides in the deep muscle memory of educator practice and not in the data itself. And so we worked really deliberately to try to develop a set of tools and resources and facilitated experiences that would support network members to begin making progress towards ensuring the conditions within their programs are such that they can actually leverage data for improvement in really meaningful ways. We created an organizing framework and related resources to support network participants in enacting effective data use practices. So the organizing framework is our data diagnostic tool, which really outlines a developmental trajectory of a program seeking to build their capacity to use data for continuous improvement across 4 domains, things like developing shared understanding, collecting, organizing, and analyzing data, organizing people to learn, and then using data for cycles of continuous improvement. And under each domain, the diagnostic sort of describes practice at 4 levels of proficiency so that programs can kind of assess and self-assess where they are and identify specific practices that they need to improve in order to make sure that they're prepared to leverage data in a meaningful way for improvement. We developed the diagnostic based on lessons from visiting programs, reviewing research on data use and educator preparation, conversations with experts, and really find it to be a really useful tool for programs to start to get a sense of all the different components that need to be in place for programs to be ready to use data in a meaningful way, and to start conversations across organizations that are typically really siloed when it comes to data use, and that can be a big barrier to using data for improvement. In the context of the CIS network, programs completed the diagnostic at the beginning of the pilot year. Then we targeted our supports to programs based on areas of collective desire to improve. So 2 of the biggest areas that network members identified were how to better collect, organize, and analyze data so that it could be used for action and improvement, and also how to organize people to learn from that data and to learn from that data in a way that's going to drive towards action. And so because programs identified collecting, organizing, analyzing data strategically is an area for growth, we worked with them to think about how to organize and present the CIS data they were gathering back to them in a way that would be most useful for improvement. So we developed a shared inquiry tool in partnership with the network that presents CIS data back to programs. It's an Excel-based tool that uses dynamic visualizations and allows them to sort and filter the data for each available common indicator in a whole host of ways so that they can really ask questions of the data in real time, and depending on the stakeholder group that they're working with, target what's shown and what's visualized in a way that's going to be meaningful for the folks around the table. We built it also as a way for programs to have a tool that wasn't so rigid that they could take it back to campus, sit down with a group around their laptop, and just work in the tool and start to make sense of and meeting from the data. And then finally, because so many of our programs struggled to effectively organize people to learn, or really wanted to think about how do we actually get folks invested in this work of using data for improvement, we leveraged our annual Inquiry Institute, which is a 3-day institute that brings program teams together as an opportunity to really model and walk program teams through what it looks like to employ effective data use practices that organize people to learn and then act on data for the purpose of improvement. So at the Inquiry Institute, we lead program teams through a structured process to inquire into the data. How do we triangulate across data sources? How do we generate areas of growth opportunities or areas of strength opportunities for growth, and figure out how to prioritize what's most important to focus on? And then to begin to unpack what are some root causes, we walk them through a process to do a root cause analysis, and then to do some really deep thinking about who else do we need to engage, what other data sources do we need to interrogate to really get to the meat of the problem so that we can target our improvement work around something specific. And as part of this work, we provide program teams with myriad resources, including data discussion protocols, structures for building shared understanding and establishing norms for data discussion, slides, trackers, planning templates, walking them through what a process could and should look like to really meaningfully inquire and then act on data for program improvement. So they leave with both a toolkit of resources and a set of skills to lead others, and having thought about how to lead others when we get back to campus through the work of using data for program improvement. And all of this work in the CIS network really has helped inform a lot of the work that we do with other networks across the country. So we're currently working with Louisiana Department of Ed to help them think about how to move through an improvement cycle focused on improving the readiness of beginning teachers in ELA and math. And this really resonated from the fact that the Department of Ed really wanted to create an opportunity for programs to build their own capacity to use data for improvement. They're doing a ton of work around providing new data to programs and really wanted to make an effort to help programs be in a position to use that data in really meaningful ways. And so that network is unique in that it's focused on readiness to teach ambitious instruction in ELA and math. All of the programs are working towards improving something about their programs related to that outcome. But through this process are also really working on developing their own capacity internally within their programs and shifting some structures in their programs to use data for improvement. The last network that we're working with is 5 preparation programs in the state of Illinois, as well as their district partners, all relatively in the Chicago area, who have come together to really try to do some collective and networked learning around improving the readiness of beginning teachers to teach in diverse classroom contexts of many sorts. And so through that work, we're working with those programs to look at data that's unique to the Illinois context as well as to their programs, help them start to identify some areas for growth in their programs related to that outcome, and then to move over the course of 2 years through a really deep engagement in thinking about inquiry into their data and then an improvement cycle related to readiness of teachers to teach in diverse contexts. So all of this work in Louisiana and Illinois draws a lot on the structures and the framework that I mentioned. So all of them think about the data diagnostic as the organizing framework for data use and are all targeting specific areas that they want to make progress on that while working to improve a specific problem of practice that their programs are facing.